Justice Department now putting out a new statement and saying it could meet with Ghislaine Maxwell in the coming days. She is the longtime associate to the late and notorious sex offender. Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence after she was convicted of conspiring with Epstein to sexually abuse minors. The Justice Department now saying, and it's a lengthy statement, but in the part of the statement saying this morning, if Ghislaine Maxwell has information about anyone who has committed crimes against victims, the FBI and the DOJ will hear what she has to say. President Trump, to this point and up and before this, has made very clear that he is ready to move on from what he called just the last few days the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, though it's very clearly not going away. So the president has shifted to say he supports transparency and in a rare move seems to be handing off power, so to speak, saying it's up to the Attorney General to release any credible information and evidence along with those grand jury transcripts. Now, 11 House Republicans have signaled support for the bipartisan move making its way through Congress to force the Epstein files to be released. But it's hit a bit of a brick wall right now. House Speaker Mike Johnson on Monday shut down any chance of a vote happening anytime before September. Let's get to the White House for the very latest on this. Elena Trine standing by for us. You brought us this new statement just as it was coming out. What does this new statement from the Justice Department mean?
I think it's still to be seen what exactly this could yield, Kate, but I think what is clear is that they are recognizing that this position that they have really stuck to over the last couple of weeks, this idea of trying to change the subject, to try to get the president's supporters and the broader American public to move on from it, isn't working. And so this is just the latest turn showing that, okay, they recognize they need to put out more information. I want to read for you just more of that statement that we got this morning from the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche. He said, at the direction of Attorney General Bondi, this is a quote, I've communicated with counsel for Ms. Maxwell to determine whether she would be willing to speak with prosecutors from the department. I anticipate meeting with Ms. Maxwell in the coming days. And then, Kate, we also got a statement from Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney, David Oscar Marcus. This is what he told CNN. He said, quote, I can confirm that we are in discussions with the government and that Ghislaine will always testify truthfully. We are grateful to President Trump for his commitment to uncovering the truth in this case. So again, of course, a couple key questions now about all of this. One is, what exactly are they going to glean from this? Will Maxwell be truthful? Does she have ulterior motives? Of course, you mentioned she's in prison now for serving a 20-year sentence. You know, they have to determine what she says, whether it's credible and whether they can release it to the public. I'd remind you, the president has now repeatedly said that he's giving the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, it's up to her to decide if there's credible information to release. She can choose to do so. But all of this, again, is another question, really, is if this will be enough for the people who have been pushing for this administration to release the Epstein files. That has really been what people have been asking for. You mentioned those Republican members in Congress who are pushing this effort to force a floor vote to have them release these Epstein files. We heard from many conservative Republicans, Trump allies, I should say, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Senator Josh Hawley, saying that they are getting calls, Kate, from their constituents about this, pressing this White House and this administration to be more transparent on the Epstein case. So what I think is very clear from the Attorney General and the DOJ more broadly is doing here is they recognize that their position thus far of trying to get everyone to move on from this, from releasing that memo over 2 weeks ago now saying that Epstein died by suicide, that there was no so-called client list. They recognize that that is not enough, that enough people are now saying we need more in this story and this desire to get more information is not going away. So now it's really up to seeing what will Maxwell say, what would this meeting with her glean, and whether or not that will be enough for the people who are, again, calling for far more transparency than this Trump administration has so far been willing to give.
And how this actually works, because she's like fighting her conviction right now. There would have to be, as Alan Dershowitz pointed out, some level of immunity agreed to. I mean, there's a lot going on here, but fascinating that the Justice Department is opening the door to this now. It's good to see you, Elena. Thank you so much. John?
All right, with us now, CNN chief political analyst David Axelrod and CNN political commentator S.E. Cupp. What about this, S.E.?
Okay, asking Ghislaine Maxwell to help bail you out is not the plot twist I saw coming, and that's really interesting. But, I mean, a lot of this has been raised. What's she going to say? Is there going to be a quid pro quo here that makes anything she says not believable? The only thing I do know is that the conspiracy theorist is never satisfied. And MAGA influencers, this administration, created a dependency on this drug that is a conspiracy theory. They did it for Epstein, but lots of other conspiracy theories. And telling them to quit cold turkey does not work. The conspiracy theorist isn't there for answers. They're there for the conspiracy. So whatever they give them, this particular sect inside of MAGA is never going to be satisfied, definitely not by something Ghislaine Maxwell says.
So it's interesting. I've been looking through the statement that came from the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, and it's the end of it where he says he's reaching out to Ghislaine Maxwell. But the first line, David, is the Department of Justice does not shy away from uncomfortable truths, nor from the responsibility to pursue justice wherever the facts may lead, which actually may tell you more than the fact that they're reaching out to Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah, but, you know, not to feed conspiracy theories, the idea that someone who's in prison for 20 years is going to testify truthfully is really a stretch. I mean, she knows the president has the pardon power. She knows that the president has used it pretty liberally. I mean that in a different way. And so there is quite a bit of incentive for her to say what is useful and what is helpful. And, you know, the idea that this Justice Department wants her to say other than that is also strained by the things that we've seen. So I'm not sure. It's just the plot just keeps getting thicker all the time here.
You know, and it's also interesting because as for asking the Attorney General to go to a judge to release the grand jury testimony, as for going to Ghislaine Maxwell to ask her to say things.
To the Justice Department, not to Congress.
To the Justice Department. But these are things that the president doesn't control directly. The things that the Attorney General and the president do control are the files and the evidence, which she presumably
she can
could
release
right now.
And suggested she would. Yeah, as Essie suggested, this is they are hoisted on their own petard or by their own petard, as Shakespeare would say. They created this environment in which, and now the environment is out of control.
And that environment in the House of Representatives, Essie, it's possible they'll go home today without voting on anything for the week because House Republicans are in a bind right now. They don't want to vote against releasing Jeffrey Epstein files,
right,
but they don't want to cross the president. So they may just do nothing?
Yeah, but from a PR standpoint, I'm not really sure what Speaker Johnson's thinking, because why would you want to prolong this over an August recess? Get this done, then everyone goes away, and you hope that it maybe gets eaten up by another news cycle.
Isn't the answer to that? This is what the president wants them to do.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
The good news is they may get home earlier. The bad news is when they get home, they're going to see a bunch of angry people who have a lot of questions about this. So.
Yeah, we just know what we're hearing.
People they ginned up. I mean, the list of characters you put up from the House of Representatives is not a surprising connection to the constituents that want more of these conspiracies, and they're going to keep asking questions because they conditioned these people to demand it.
With us is Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis, a Republican from New York. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. What do you think of this move by the Department of Justice, and what do you think about calls from some Republican members of Congress, including Senator Josh Hawley, to actually get congressional testimony from Ghislaine Maxwell?
Look, I think both are good ideas. I think anything we can do to give transparency to the public is a positive thing here. President Trump ran on being the most transparent president in administration. He's known for releasing transcripts and parts of phone calls that he's had with other world leaders. He has been very transparent, and when you all of a sudden don't want to be transparent anymore, it raises questions and curiosity. And so I think it's a good idea, but I also have to ask the question as to why at this moment has this become such a big issue. Remember, Biden administration was there for 4 years. We never heard from the Democrats or Republicans, for that matter, for calls for this information to be released. And I think it is really interesting that this is happening on the 6-month anniversary of the president being sworn in, where he has delivered significant wins, from securing the border to attracting trillions of dollars in investment to providing the largest tax cut for working Americans, middle class and senior citizens, lower energy costs. I mean, it really begs the question as to what, they're just trying to distract. Now, with that said, I support these efforts to be transparent and to release this information to the public. We do need to make sure that it's done in a responsible and cautious manner, so we are protecting witnesses and we're protecting the victims as well.
Welcome bonus 300 and
to speak to convict. Monica, let's start with you. Some of Trump's top Justice Department officials now say they want federal prosecutors to speak to convicted Epstein co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. So what is behind this move?
Yeah, and there are a lot of questions here, Ariel, about why now, why this meeting, and what, if any, information a meeting like this could produce. And it's really unclear because let's remind everybody that Ghislaine Maxwell was indicted and investigated under the first Trump administration, and she was convicted in the Biden administration. But if there were questions about any additional material or things that she could provide, a lot of that you would think would have taken place during the course of her trial. And if there was going to be any kind of a plea agreement, which there wasn't at the time, again, what kind of a question now would be different? That's what a lot of experts and what our own team, in terms of the reporting that we've done in the past, is raising here. But it comes at a moment where the administration and the president himself is under a lot of pressure to produce some new information, because there have still been many calls from his own supporters, from those leading the MAGA movement, to uncover, in their words, the truth of what happened here, even though we don't know what that means. So you do have the Deputy Attorney General saying that he was directed by the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to schedule this meeting, and we're getting confirmation from Ghislaine Maxwell's own attorney. And you see there that comment from Todd Blanche. He writes, "No one is above the law and no lead is off limits." But again, it's really unclear what kind of a lead there could be here. And then for her own part, her lawyer is confirming and thanking President Trump for trying to pursue this, trying to see if there is anything new here, if there's any light that could be shed. Though again, she has been convicted. She was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, which she is serving now. The question is there anything that she could provide, or is this meant as a distraction at a time when the administration has been raising other issues to try to detract from the conversation, though this new meeting only adds a lot more interest in the Epstein case.
So you saw there the lawyer confirming that this could potentially happen. She's been serving her 20-year prison sentence. So could Ghislaine Maxwell end up with a deal on this?
I think it's possible, Ariel. And the reason is where we are in Ghislaine Maxwell's own timeline. Ghislaine Maxwell is currently petitioning the Supreme Court to review her conviction. That's a conviction, as Monica mentioned, that resulted in a 20-year prison sentence that was upheld by the Second Circuit. That's the Federal Appeals Court. And now, just as recently as last week, Trump's own Department of Justice saying Ghislaine Maxwell deserves to still be in prison, that she was not essentially a third-party beneficiary of the deal that Jeffrey Epstein struck many, many years ago with Florida prosecutors. That's a deal that was interpreted as to only cover Florida. That resulted in his prosecution by the Southern District of New York before his death, and also in Ghislaine Maxwell's prosecution.
It's so fascinating here. Matthew, you've reported on the Epstein paper trail and Trump's past friendship with him. So where does Ghislaine Maxwell fit into the puzzle here?
Well, I mean, she was basically Epstein's main confidant for many years, up until about 2009 or so. And one of her roles was to help recruit women and underage girls for Epstein. So she was very critical in, the operation. And she was around all the time at the various different properties. And obviously there are pictures of her and she knowing the president. But, one thing that's important to note is that she has maintained she's been innocent all along. She's been deposed and she's always indicated that she knew nothing about what was going on. And it would be a big break and turn for her to presumably cough up names. And even if she was to do that, the question is, would she have anything to back that up? I mean, just throwing out names is not usually what you need to do in terms of a plea deal. You need to offer up something to substantiate, and it's not clear she would have any of that.
It would be fascinating to hear from her the first time since some of those civil suits against her. Sahil, GOP Congressman Thomas Massie wants to force a vote on releasing the Epstein files, but House Speaker Mike Johnson opposes that. He wants to push it off until at least after the August recess. Where do things stand, and what's the earliest we could see any potential movement on this?
Well, things are a bit of a mess here, Ariel. The House is largely frozen. The Rules Committee, which sends bills to the floor, had to cancel business yesterday because they can't find the votes to move forward with any of the business that Republican leaders want. The simple reason is that Democrats plan to offer amendments requiring the disclosure and release of files related to Jeffrey Epstein. A bunch of Republicans want to vote with them, and House Republican leadership can't allow that because that would go against the wishes of President Trump. So all they can vote on right now are bills requiring a 2/3 majority, so-called suspension votes, things like renaming the post office. They don't have a lot of those to do. So there's already talk at this point of cutting short business in the House this week and just sending members home for an extra few days for the entire month of August and coming back in September and dealing with this. Is that going to make a difference? Well, take a listen to what Congressman Tom Massie, who authored the resolution to require the release of Epstein files, said about that.
So what will happen is over the August recess, I think momentum will build for transparency. I don't think this is going to go away. And I think when we return in September, we'll get phase 2 of the Epstein files, because we'll get, I believe, every Democrat and at least a dozen Republicans who want transparency and justice.
Now, that dozen Republicans is key because he's using a discharge petition to get around House Republican leadership and force a vote against the will of Speaker Johnson, against the will of President Trump. And at least some Republicans this morning say it's inevitable. These files are going to come out, but they would prefer that the Trump administration does it on their own.
So clearly some infighting there. Monica, the White House trying to walk a pretty fine line here, pursuing new avenues to get some of this information out on Epstein, but clearly stopping very far short of what some of President Trump's constituents may want, a full dump of all these files. How are these mixed messages playing out with the MAGA base?
Yeah, it has certainly been fascinating and really complex to watch because many in the MAGA base are calling for a non-existent client list, and they have been really clamoring for that since this started. And it was the own Department of Justice under the president now and Attorney General Pam Bondi who says that no client list exists, that instead when she was referring to that on a Fox News interview earlier in the year, that she was talking about the totality of those documents. Then you had President Trump say that he wanted to direct her to release any relevant grand jury testimony that could be related to this. But that, of course, has to go through a court process. It has to go through a bunch of legal hurdles, and it's unclear whether anything that could be declassified and shared would shed any new light on this. And we also know, Ariel, that a lot of this information is related to minors and to the victims, those who were, again, the victims of convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell. So there are, again, not many indications that there could be new information, but that doesn't mean that anything has certainly quelled the desire from his own supporters to see what else could be out there with this conspiracy.
So on that point, Lisa, what is the danger? Obviously, there's the potential to re-traumatize some of these victims who may be in that grand jury assessment.
Well, it's not just the re-traumatization of them, but there are laws on the books now that protect against the release of their information. And I'm not just talking about their names. I'm talking about any information that could be used to identify them. The last wave of unsealing of materials in a civil Epstein-related case resulted in a bunch of victims coming forward saying, I feel that I am in danger. If you release my name, it's not just a question of my mental health. My physical safety is at risk too. But I also want to say to some folks who have been critical of my saying that victims' rights are at issue here because I have said that the redactions aren't enough. Imagine that you gave testimony in a matter like this and they cover up every mention of the word Ariel Reshef and your address and maybe other things that people could use to identify you. When that is in the public domain, you know that that's about you. You hear every news channel, every publication talking about you, and the risks to victims' mental health here should not be undermined at all. It is real. It is serious. The fact that we aren't talking to victims, but talking to each other is a reflection of how much they want to stay under the radar and protected right now.
And they thought their identities would stay under the radar with all of this under seal. Matthew, on your reporting on the Epstein money trail here, the top Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee says Epstein sent over $1 billion in wire transfers, and that should have piqued some interest from banks at the time. Where was all that money going? Who was he paying out, and what was he paying for?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically this kind of operation required a tremendous amount of money and inflow because you have properties all over the world where he was taking women and girls. The banks there was like JP Morgan, which was his bank for a long time. There was some awareness of what was going on. But the reality is that Epstein was bringing in a lot of business for these banks in terms of clients. He also was bringing in a lot of businesses himself in terms of the transactions, was generating a lot of fees. It's a sad statement to some degree that Wall Street sort of wanted to look the other way when they could because he was a powerful person and valuable to them. It's a great mystery still what he was really doing in terms of the tax advice he provided people, but we do know that people like Leon Black, the private equity billionaire, paid him over $158 million for tax advice. The thing is all this stuff may be purely innocent in the sense of what was going on, but it does raise a lot of mystery and it shows like there needs to be better checks and balances in terms of Wall Street and monitoring its behavior and how its money goes around. And sex trafficking is supposed to be something they're supposed to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, that was a lot of money floating around. Matthew, were those transactions ever investigated as part of the various Epstein criminal probes? Some Republicans are now saying, why didn't some of the leadership then press President Biden's administration to release the information?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, the money transactions have never really come up. They certainly didn't come up in Maxwell's case and did not come. They weren't mentioned in the indictment against Epstein. If he had lived and if he had gone to trial, it's presumably possible some of these money transactions may have come up since it was his operation. You can have a separate idea like why were the banks themselves not looked at. we've seen obviously money laundering cases brought against banks. The only bank that ever paid any penalty was Deutsche Bank, which was investigated by the New York Department of Financial Services. It's a good question, like whether regulators, did they fall down on the job, and other federal authorities in looking at the money flows? I think that's a legitimate question to be asked.